And our aim is to ensure the safety of our border and to neutralize the terrorists in our border area, and thus saving Syrians, local Syrians, from the oppression and cruelty of terrorist organization PYD-YPG, and to create a safe and peaceful environment for the dignified, safe and voluntary return of Syrian refugees.
Okay, you call it a safe zone, and the Kurds think of it as an existential threat that will wipe out their homeland. You have seen nothing but condemnation from the rest of the world, from your NATO allies. Your government has made a terrible mistake here.
I think this is not a mistake, and I invite all the people who are watching us now to understand the NATO ally Turkey's legitimate security concerns. And putting the equation as Turkey versus Kurds is very wrong and profoundly unfair. If you think more than 300,000 Syrian Kurds in Turkey, we have been giving shelter to them. And if you think those more than 300,000 Syrian Kurds who could not go back to their homes in those areas, then I think you should understand my complaint about this equation. This operation is not against Kurds, and there is no existential threat for Kurds.
You have played a historic role, and I think that has been recognised by our guests, a historic role in sheltering refugees, and yet you talk about wiping out terrorists to cover anyone who you may hit. Many of the people who will be targeted, as you know, have no links with prescribed groups like the PKK. 10 civilians were killed tonight. Was that your intention?
Our intention is saving Syrians from that tyranny. And if I would like to remind you that we have been in fighting against PKK more than 3 decades, and fighting against ISIS more than 5 years.
You just went in when President Trump left then. I mean, it can't have been that urgent.
And if you remember the Turkish victims under the PKK and Daesh terrorist attacks in Istanbul,
but this is not about the PKK. This is not about the PKK.
YPG is PKK.
No, there are absolutely no links. That's not what successive governments, including the British Foreign Affairs Committee, has found. There are no links between the PKK and the kind of groups and the people that you are targeting now who are fleeing their homes and taking their belongings.
They are not targeting civilians.
Well, that's the ones that you will eventually hit.
And designating PKK as terrorist organization and engaging tactical strategy with PYD-YPG is a big hypocrisy. And engaging and investing in those areas for those bunch of terrorists for many money and for many equipment and weapons is very unethical and illogical. Instead of that, we are calling our allies to cooperate with Turkey, to show solidarity with Turkey against Daesh, against terrorists.
Well, that's not working very well, and it's not working because the Kurds lost 11,000 people fighting ISIS. They are currently guarding ISIS prisoners in camps. They will not be able to carry on guarding those prisoners. You're going to unleash ISIS prisoners back on the world again. Is that what you want?
Against Daesh and ISIS, Turkey is the member of international coalition from the beginning. And trusting a terrorist organization and relying on them against Daesh, instead of trusting and relying on a NATO ally and the second biggest army of the NATO, is illogical.
The practicality is they have been looking after the captured prisoners. They won't be able to if they're fighting Turkey. So what happens to those prisoners now?
They are using those Daesh terrorists against Turkey. Do you know that they are releasing them in exchange of sending them to Turkey and making terrorist attacks? Not only in Turkey, also they are attacking Syrians in northwest area.
But I'm interested in knowing what you think happens to all those prisoners, all the fighting, all the effort that went into stopping the IS caliphate. What happens to those prisoners now?
I can explain you. I know that there is only one interest in this part of the world, that is Daesh. And Turkey and Turkish army is the only army who has engaged in chest-to-chest combat against Daesh on the ground for 4 years. We killed more than 4,000 Daesh terrorists in Syria. And I don't want to remind you our efforts in Iraq and in Turkey. And Turkish people has become the victim of Daesh terrorist attacks in Ankara, Diyarbakir, Istanbul, and in different cities of Turkey. And because of that reason, if you want to continue trusting and relying on terrorist organizations against another terrorist organizations, it will be very wrong and dangerous. Instead of that, Turkey is prepared to get all responsibility against Daesh terrorists in those camps on prisoners. And whatever the solution and operation will go, we are ready to undertake our responsibilities. But also the sustainable solution for those Daesh terrorists in that area should be in the countries who have their own citizens as terrorist organizations. The sustainable solution is repatriation of those guys by their own countries.
Talk to you about that another time. I think that will be important to explore. Ambassador, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tonight we're hearing